My house was on fire. My 3-week-old twins were screaming inside, and my husband was standing in the driveway, holding his phone,
Good
watching
morning,
it burn.
sleepyhead. We saved
He
you a
didn't call for
donut.
help.
Oh, perfect.
He
I'm
didn't run
starving.
toward
Did
the
you guys sleep well?
flames.
I did.
He just
thanks.
stood
Those
there,
look amazing,
calm,
Kate.
like a man checking the weather. And the woman beside him? My best friend of 15 years, the godmother of my children. She was smiling. I was crawling through fire, through melting carpet, through glass, with my babies pressed against my chest, while the two people I trusted most in this world watched me die. What I didn't know yet?
Why don't
This had been
eggs
planned
tell
for
jokes?
weeks. Every door
I
sealed,
don't know why.
every window
Because they might
screwed
crack
shut,
each other up.
every smoke alarm disabled. One night, $2.3 million, and a woman who was supposed to be dead before midnight. I was that woman. But here's what they forgot to plan for: me. This story is proof that the people closest to you can become your greatest danger, and that surviving betrayal is the most powerful thing a woman can do. If you've ever been made to feel invisible by someone you loved, stay with me, because this one is for you. Hit subscribe right now, drop a comment telling me the word survivor, and share this with one woman who needs to hear it today.
The smoke was so thick I could not see my own hand in front of my face. The ceiling was dripping with fire, and the walls were screaming from the intense heat. And somewhere inside that blazing inferno, my 3-week-old twin boys were crying for their mother. My name is Rachel Dawson. I was 34 years old, an English teacher at a high school in Knoxville, Tennessee. I had been a wife for 12 years and a mother for only 3 weeks. I was about to discover that the man I had built my life with had just tried to murder me. But I am getting ahead of the story. Let's go back to the beginning. 6 weeks before my husband trapped me in a burning house and left with my best friend. The nursery was filled with the smell of baby powder and new hope. I was standing between two identical white cribs, just watching my son sleep. Noah was on the left, always spread out like a little starfish. Lucas was on the right, curled into a tight ball as if he were still in the womb. They were 3 weeks old, born premature but perfectly healthy. They were my miracle boys. I had waited 8 long years for them. I endured 3 devastating miscarriages, followed by 2 rounds of in vitro fertilization that put us $17,000 in debt. I sat through one crushing appointment where a doctor told me, with pity in his eyes, that I might never be able to carry a pregnancy to term. But I did, against all of the odds. Against every single expectation, I had done it. And now, here they were, breathing softly in their cribs. I felt like the most fortunate woman on the planet. I knew I wasn't perfect. I drove a 12-year-old Honda Civic that had a big dent in the passenger side door. I had a habit of stress-eating chocolate at 2 in the morning and had put on 40 pounds since my wedding day. I earned $42,000 a year teaching Shakespeare to teenagers so I could never afford the fancy stroller all the other moms in my neighborhood pushed around. But standing there in that nursery, watching my babies, none of that stuff mattered. I had everything I had ever dreamed of, or at least that is what I believed. The front door opened downstairs. I heard heavy footsteps and the familiar scent of my husband's cologne coming up the stairs. It was mixed with another fragrance, something floral, like jasmine. Jason appeared in the nursery doorway. He was 6'2", a former college quarterback for the University of Tennessee, and still handsome at 36. He had a smile that used to make all my friends jealous, back when we began dating in high school. We had been sweethearts since we were sophomores. We married at 22, the perfect couple that everyone was sure would be together forever. They were all wrong. He walked across the room and put his arms around me from behind. I leaned back against him, feeling protected and so thankful. I ignored the small voice in my mind that kept asking questions I did not want the answers to. Questions like why he smelled of jasmine perfume when his office was a 40-minute drive from any department store. or questions about why our savings account had suddenly dropped by $12,000 last month without any explanation, and questions about why he looked so startled every single time his phone buzzed. I pushed all those thoughts aside. I had been doing that for months. I was so desperate for my happy ending that I chose to ignore every single warning sign right in front of my face. If you are listening to this right now and something in your relationship feels wrong, please trust your instincts. I did not, and it nearly cost me my life. That night, after Jason was asleep, I found a receipt inside his jacket pocket. It was from a jewelry store for $800. My birthday was still 3 months away, and our anniversary had been 2 months ago. I held that little piece of paper and felt a knot form in my stomach. Then I convinced myself that it must be an early birthday gift. Maybe he was just trying to be romantic. Maybe I was just being paranoid and hormonal. I threw the receipt in the trash. I never asked him about it. That is a choice I would come to regret for the rest of my life. The next morning, Kate Sullivan showed up with coffee and donuts. Her blonde hair was flawless. Her smile was radiant, and her designer handbag was probably worth more than I made in a month. She had been my best friend since we were freshmen in high school. We had 20 years of shared memories, inside jokes, and secrets between us. She was by my side when my father passed away. I was there for her when her first marriage completely fell apart. She was the godmother to my twin boys. She helped me plan my baby shower. She even cried with joy when I finally became pregnant after so many years of heartbreak. She was also sleeping with my husband, but I had no idea about that yet. Kate made sweet noises over the babies while I fixed us breakfast, which seemed like perfectly normal best friend behavior. Except I did notice her eyes dart toward the window the moment Jason's car came up the driveway. I saw how her hand shook just a little bit when he came into the kitchen. I caught the brief look that flashed between them, as fast as a lightning strike, gone before I could even process what it was. "Are you okay?" I asked her. "Fine," she replied. "Just tired. Work has been really crazy." Kate had been working at Jason's insurance agency for 3 years now, ever since her divorce had left her completely broke and desperate. Jason had offered her a position, and at the time, I thought it was such a generous thing to do. Here is a lesson I learned far too late. When your husband offers your best friend a job, you need to pay very close attention to his reasons. And when your best friend accepts that job, pay attention to the way she looks at him when she thinks you are not looking. But I was far too trusting. I was too desperate to see only the good in people. My mother always told me that was my biggest weakness. She was right. While I was sleeping that night, completely exhausted from all the midnight feedings, my husband was drowning. Jason Dawson owed $340,000 to a gambling syndicate that had ties to organized crime. For 3 years, he had been secretly taking money from his own insurance company. He was always one step ahead of the auditors, but one step behind on his debts. His business partner, Derek Cole, had figured it all out 6 months before. Derek was blackmailing him, taking $20,000 here and $30,000 there. It was a slow strangulation that he disguised as friendly loans. And on top of all that, Kate was pregnant. She was 8 weeks along. A month earlier, she had given Jason an ultimatum. "You either leave Rachel, or I go to the police and tell them everything I know about your financial crimes. It is your choice, baby. It is either her or me." That night, Jason sat at his desk, staring at the life insurance policies spread out in front of him. Rachel Dawson, $1.5 million through the school district, and another $800,000 through his agency. The total value was $2.3 million. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Kate. I figured out a way. An electrical fire, faulty wiring. It happens in old houses all the time. Nobody will ever suspect a thing. We can finally be together, forever. Jason stared down at that message for a very long time. His wife was upstairs, sleeping without a care in the world. She trusted him completely. His sons were in their cribs, only 3 weeks old, innocent, and completely helpless. And he was on the verge of making Fuke a choice that would brand him as a monster for the rest of his life. The man I had married died somewhere between his gambling addiction, his affair, and his desperation. The person who tried to kill me was a stranger I had never truly known. Looking back on it now, I can see that my husband had lost his humanity long before that night, but I did not have a clue. I was too preoccupied with being grateful, too busy being happy, and too busy ignoring every single sign that my supposedly perfect life was constructed entirely on lies. The countdown had officially started. 6 weeks until the fire. 6 weeks until I would have to crawl through hell to save my children. 6 weeks until I would finally understand the true meaning of betrayal. Kate Sullivan had been waiting 16 years for this exact moment. She was sitting in a motel room 30 miles outside of Knoxville, with the bed sheets tangled around her. Jason was lying next to her. Through the cheap, thin curtains, the afternoon sunlight cast stripes across the bed. "I am pregnant," she told him. Jason's face turned pale. "What? 8 weeks? I took 3 different tests." Kate watched him as he processed this news. She saw the fear flicker in his eyes. She watched him calculate, just like he always did, what this would mean for him. She had known Jason since high school. In fact, she had dated him first. It was their sophomore year, right before Rachel transferred to their school from Nashville. They had been together for 3 months, 3 perfect months, where Kate finally felt like she was important. And then Rachel arrived, the new girl with a shy smile and big brown eyes that looked at the world as if it were full of wonder, instead of constant disappointment. Jason dropped Kate like she was old news. "We are just better off as friends," he had told her. "You get it, right?" Oh, Kate got it. She understood that she wasn't pretty enough, or soft enough, or good enough. She understood that Rachel seemed to get everything Kate ever wanted just by being herself. She spent the next 16 years of her life understanding that. She stood next to Rachel at her wedding, smiling for all the pictures, while something deep inside of her twisted into pure poison. She held Rachel's babies during their baptism, all the while imagining what it would be like if they were hers. Then 3 years ago, when her own marriage ended, she accepted a job at Jason's insurance agency. Her reason was not money. She simply wanted to be near him. A constant reminder of everything he had lost. She was just waiting for an opening. That opening came at the office Christmas party 2 years ago. After too much wine and during a slow song, Jason put his hand on the small of her back. He whispered, "I never stopped thinking about you. You know that, do you not?" she asked. "Then why did you choose her?" he replied. "Because I was 17 and stupid. Because she was the safe choice, and you were a risk." That was when Kate kissed him, and he kissed her back. It was the beginning of the end. Now in a cheap motel room, she sat up in bed. She let the sheets slide from her body. She said, "Here's what will happen. You will leave Rachel, you will marry me, and we will raise this baby as a family." Jason told her it was not that simple. "It is exactly that simple. I have been your sordid secret for 2 years. I have watched you go home to her every single night. I am finished with that. The twins were just born. I cannot just walk out on them," he pleaded. "You can, and you will," she threatened. "Unless, of course, you want me to tell Rachel everything. About us, about your gambling problem, about the money you have been stealing from your own company." She watched his expression shift. Confusion gave way to fear. Fear turned into cold calculation. Kate Sullivan was not a foolish woman. She understood exactly what she was doing. There is no money, Jason finally said. Even if I left tomorrow, I am completely broke. Worse than broke. I owe money to very dangerous people. Then find the money, she demanded. How? I have already taken everything I possibly can from the company. Derek knows. He is bleeding me dry. Kate paused for a moment. Then she asked the question she had been waiting weeks to ask. What about the insurance? What insurance? Rachel's life insurance policy through the school. It is worth $1.5 million, plus whatever private policy you have for her. Jason felt his blood turn to ice. What are you suggesting? Kate looked him directly in the eye, without a trace of hesitation or guilt. I am suggesting that accidents happen. Fires happen, she continued, especially to an exhausted mother with newborn babies. She falls asleep with a candle burning. The old house has faulty wiring. These things are tragic, but they are not suspicious. You are talking about killing my wife, he said in disbelief. I am talking about starting our life together, the life we were always meant to have. Is that not what you want? Do you not want me? Kate moved closer, her hand sliding up his thigh. $2.3 million, a clean slate. Our baby can grow up with a father who is actually there. All you have to do is be brave enough to take it. Jason closed his eyes. Her or me? Kate smiled. She had finally won. Over the next 4 weeks, Kate and Jason planned my murder with the chilling precision of a military operation. Kate, always the careful one, managed the logistics. She told him to disconnect the smoke detectors gradually over several days, remove one battery at a time. If Rachel noticed the silence, he could blame it on them being dead. Loosen the gas line behind the stove just enough so it would not smell, but enough to fuel the fire when it started. He would make it look like an old pipe finally failed. He would seal the windows shut with heavy-duty screws, disguised as childproofing. New parents do things like that, she reasoned, taking safety measures for when the babies start to crawl. He would install deadbolts on every door, the kind that could be locked from the outside. Extra security for his new family. Jason was in charge of the alibi, a business dinner with Derek and 2 prospective clients on the night of the fire. He would have multiple witnesses confirming he was nowhere near our home. Restaurant workers would remember the charming insurance agent who bought dessert and left a very generous tip. Kate would be at her home, alone, ready to get the devastating news. They picked a date. March 14th, a Saturday. My sister, Megan, was scheduled to be out of town for a conference. Our neighbors were going to a wedding in Nashville. It was the perfect night for a tragedy. My sister, Megan, never trusted Jason. She could not pinpoint why. He was always polite and charming, the perfect brother-in-law on paper, but something about him always made her uncomfortable. It was the way his smile never seemed genuine, or the way he sometimes looked at me, not with love, but with something that felt more like a calculation. A week before the fire, Megan called me. Hey, can we talk? She asked. Of course, what is going on? I said. Megan paused. How do you tell your sister that you have a bad feeling without sounding completely crazy? It is probably nothing, she started, but at the baby shower, I saw Kate acting strangely. She was on the phone with someone, talking about the 14th. It just felt odd. I laughed it off. The 14th is a Saturday. She is probably just planning something for Jason's birthday next month. You know how she gets with surprises. Yeah, probably. Meg, I love you, but you need to stop looking for trouble where there is none. Kate has been my best friend for 15 years. She is the godmother to my children. Whatever you think you saw, I am sure it was nothing. Megan wanted to argue. She wanted to beg me to be cautious. Instead, she just said, You are right. I am just being paranoid. Sorry. We said goodnight. After hanging up, Megan stared at the phone in her hand. She should have insisted. She should have driven over to my house. She should have done anything else. Instead, she just went to bed. It was a choice she would never forgive herself for making, and neither would I. March 14th started like any other Saturday. I passed the day taking care of the twins, feeding them, changing them, and rocking them back to sleep whenever they cried. By 6 in the evening, I felt an exhaustion that had settled deep into my bones. After their last feeding, I gently placed Noah and Lucas into their cribs. Noah fussed for a second, his tiny face wrinkling in protest, but Lucas was already fast asleep. I stood between their cribs, placing one hand in each, feeling their little chests rise and fall. My boys, they were my entire world. Jason appeared in the doorway, already in a suit. "I have that dinner with Derek," he said. "Big client. It might run late." "On a Saturday?" "I know, I am sorry." He walked across the room and kissed my forehead, holding the kiss for just a moment longer than usual. "I love you, all three of you." "I love you too," I said. He walked out. I heard his car start and drive away. I had no idea he would be back in 4 hours, carrying gasoline and a dark purpose. At 8:30, I took a shower. It was my first real shower in days. I just stood under the hot water and let myself cry. It was not out of sadness, but from pure exhaustion, raging hormones, and the immense pressure of being a new mother. I thought about calling Megan. I thought about admitting that I was having a hard time, that the babies were more difficult than I had ever imagined. I wanted to tell her something felt wrong in my marriage, but I could not explain what it was. Instead, I dried off, put on my pajamas, and fell asleep on the sofa with the baby monitor in my hand. At 10:47, an explosion woke me up. It was not a gradual or gentle awakening. One moment, I was in a normal dream, and the next, I was on the floor. My ears were ringing, and my living room had turned into a vision of hell. Fire was everywhere. It crawled across the ceiling like a living creature, devouring the walls and breathing a heat that sucked the air from my lungs. And over the roar, I heard a sound that would haunt my dreams forever. My babies were screaming. Noah, Lucas. I struggled to my feet and ran toward the nursery. The hallway had become a blazing tunnel. The carpet melted under my bare feet, sticking to my skin and burning me. Fire dripped from the ceiling. The smoke was so thick I could not see my own hands in front of my face. I crawled on the floor. I prayed. I screamed my son's names over and over. The nursery door was so hot it blistered my palms when I finally forced it open. Inside, smoke was swirling around the cribs. The plastic mobile above them was melting, dripping onto the blankets below. But they were alive. They were screaming and choking, absolutely terrified, but they were alive. I grabbed both of them and wrapped them inside my nightgown. I pressed them against my chest, holding them so tightly I was afraid I might be hurting them. "Mama is here. Mama has you." I ran to the front door. I pulled on the handle until my hands were bleeding. It was locked. I ran to the back door. The deadbolt was thrown, but from the outside, I could see it through the small window, mocking me. The kitchen window was sealed shut with heavy screws. The childproofing Jason had installed last week. He was not protecting us. He was sealing my tomb. The garage door had been nailed shut. The repairs he did the week before. He was not fixing anything at all. He was making sure I had no way to escape. The smoke was getting heavier. The babies were coughing and choking. Their screams were growing faint. I learned something in that moment that I believe every mother understands deep in her soul. There is absolutely nothing you will not do for your children. Fire cannot stop you. Fear cannot stop you. Even death itself cannot stop you. My eyes fell on the iron base of a lamp on the end table. It was heavy, solid, and purely decorative. It was a weapon. I placed the babies on the couch for just a second, just long enough. I grabbed the lamp and swung it at the window frame with every bit of strength I had left. The first swing cracked the wood. On the second, splinters flew everywhere. On the third swing, the frame finally broke. The opening was high off the ground and surrounded by jagged glass. The space was barely large enough for me to fit through. I did not hesitate. I acted. I wrapped Noah in one blanket and Lucas in another. I pushed them through the opening first, lowering them onto the grass as gently as I could. My arms were shaking and burning, on the verge of giving out. Then I climbed through the broken glass. It sliced my arms, my legs, and my face. I could feel my skin tearing, my warm blood mixing with sweat and soot. I did not care. I fell onto the lawn and crawled to my babies. I gathered them into my arms. They were crying. They were breathing. They were alive. Thank God. Thank God. Thank God. And then I looked up. A car was parked at the end of our driveway. It was Jason's car. He was standing next to it, holding his phone, his face lit up by the flames of our burning home. His expression was not one of panic or horror. He did not look desperate to save his family. His face was calm, calculating, and almost looked disappointed. And then a woman stepped out of the passenger side. Her blonde hair seemed to catch the light from the fire. She wore bright red lipstick. It was a silhouette I knew all too well. It was Kate. "Jason!" I screamed. "Please help the babies." Jason just stared at me, his eyes shifting from our son, coughing in my arms, to the inferno that had been our home. My best friend, Kate, moved closer to him, whispering something in his ear. Her hand rested on his arm with a familiar possessiveness that told me everything. Jason gave one sharp nod, got into his car, and Kate slid in beside him. Then they drove off. I crumpled onto the lawn, clutching my children as the horrifying truth washed over me. My husband had just tried to murder me. My best friend had helped him. They had abandoned us to die in the fire, but that fire didn't destroy me. It showed me the monster Jason truly was. As devastating as that truth was, it gave me the one thing I needed to survive what was coming. Pure, unadulterated rage. I held my babies tight and watched their tail lights fade into the night. As the sound of approaching sirens grew louder and the heat of my burning house scorched my back, I made a promise. I would survive. I would prove what they did, and I would make them pay, no matter how long it took or what it cost. They tried to burn me alive. They had no idea what they had just created. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital burn unit. My arms were completely covered in bandages, my face was swollen beyond recognition, and a tube snaked down my throat, making every breath feel like I was swallowing fire. My first word, a ragged whisper past cracked lips, was, "Babies." A kind nurse named Gloria Thompson squeezed my hand. "They are okay, honey. They have some minor smoke inhalation, but they are stable. You saved them. You are a hero." I closed my eyes and sobbed. For 2 days, I drifted in a haze, my dreams bleeding into nightmares. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw flames, heard my babies screaming, and felt the blistering heat on my skin. And every time I woke up, I saw Jason in the driveway, Kate beside him as they drove away. On the 4th day, Detective Sarah Parker came to my room. She was in her mid-40s, with intelligent eyes and a professional air that gave nothing away. She pulled a chair close to my bed and opened a notebook. "Mrs. Dawson, I know this is hard, but I need to ask you some questions about the fire." I told her everything, starting with the locked doors. I described the windows that had been sealed shut and the explosion that seemed to come from nowhere. I told her about Jason and Kate standing in the driveway. "They planned it together," I said. "They left us to burn. I saw them." Detective Parker wrote everything down without a single change in her expression. Then she said, "Mrs. Dawson, your husband has been here. every day since the fire. He has been sleeping in the waiting room. He has spoken to every doctor and every nurse. He has only left to shower and get a change of clothes. He is lying. He has 6 witnesses who confirm he was at a business dinner until after the fire was reported. The restaurant staff, his business partner, 2 clients. He came back, I insisted. I saw him with Kate. The restaurant is 45 minutes away. The fire was reported at 10:52. According to multiple witnesses, your husband was at the table until 11:15. That is impossible, I said. I saw him. He was in the driveway. Mrs. Dawson. Detective Parker's voice softened, but her words were absolutely devastating. Smoke inhalation can cause hallucinations and memory distortion. The brain tries to make sense of chaos, and sometimes it creates narratives that feel real but are not. I know what I saw. I believe you think you do. That moment was the beginning of 3 years of hell, not because I doubted myself, but because I realized everyone else would. When they call you crazy, when they question your reality, when they make you feel like you cannot trust your own eyes, that is a special kind of torture. And I need you to know, your truth is still true, even when no one believes it. The next day, Jason arrived with flowers, a camera crew from the local news trailing right behind him. Someone had tipped them off. Someone had arranged this moment for maximum impact. Jason appeared in my doorway, his face a perfect mask of grief and relief. Rachel, thank God you are awake. His voice broke. His eyes glistened. I thought I lost you. I thought I lost everything. He crossed the room and reached for my hand. I slapped him. The sound echoed through the room. The camera caught everything. Get out, Rachel. Get out! The nurses rushed in, and security was called. Jason was escorted out, looking wounded and confused. It was a perfect performance. That night, the local news ran the story. Fire survivor Rachel Dawson is recovering at Knoxville General, but sources say the trauma may have affected more than just her body. Her husband, Jason Dawson, who has kept vigil at her bedside since the tragedy, says he is committed to supporting her through this difficult time, whatever it takes. The footage showed me slapping Jason, showed my bandaged face twisted with rage, and showed security pulling us apart. The comments were brutal. Poor man. His wife clearly has PTSD. She should be grateful he is standing by her. Some women just cannot accept help. My sister, Megan, arrived from Nashville and found me sobbing in my hospital bed. They are making me look crazy, Meg. He tried to kill me, and they are making me look crazy. I believe you. You are the only one. Megan held my hand and did not let go. Here's what I need you to understand. Abusers are master manipulators. They control the narrative before you even know there is a story being told. If you are in this situation, document everything. Tell someone you trust. Write it down. Send yourself emails. Because when they try to gaslight you, evidence is your lifeline. I had no evidence, just my word against his, and nobody believed me. 6 weeks after the fire, I hired a private investigator. Marcus Webb was 53 years old, a former cop who retired after his wife died of cancer. He had a reputation for being relentless and thorough. Within 2 weeks, he delivered hotel receipts showing Jason and Kate had checked into the same room 14 times in the past year. Text messages proving their affair, financial records showing Jason's gambling debts and embezzlement, and evidence of the sealed windows and disabled smoke detectors. This is enough to destroy him, Marcus said, spreading the documents across Megan's kitchen table. Enough for a divorce, maybe enough to reopen the criminal investigation. I allowed myself to hope for the first time in weeks. I am going to win, I whispered. He is going to pay for what he did. I filed a motion for an independent fire investigation. The district attorney agreed to review the case. I made a mistake that night. I celebrated too soon. I called my mother and told her justice was coming. I let myself believe the system would protect me. 3 days before the independent review, Marcus Webb's car ran off Highway 29 into a ravine. It was a single vehicle accident. His blood alcohol level was .16. Marcus Webb had been sober for 15 years. He went to AA meetings every week. He had a chip in his wallet, celebrating 5,000 days without a drink. They killed him. I know they killed him, but I could not prove it. And without Marcus, without his testimony and contacts, the independent review was postponed indefinitely. My evidence became just paper. My hope became ashes. The man who believed me was dead. And somewhere in Knoxville, Jason Dawson was smiling. 3 months after the fire, Jason filed for divorce and custody. His lawyer was Victoria West, a shark in designer clothes who billed $800 an hour and had never lost a custody case. She stood before the judge with a stack of psychiatric evaluations and a sympathetic expression. Your Honor, my client has done everything possible to support his wife through this trauma. He has visited his children daily. He has offered reconciliation. He has been patient and loving despite her accusations. Victoria paused for effect. But Mrs. Dawson has responded with paranoia and erratic behavior. She hired a private investigator to surveil her husband. She has accused him publicly and repeatedly of attempted murder without evidence. Because it is true, I shouted. Mrs. Dawson, control yourself. Kate took the stand next, in a modest dress, with minimal makeup, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. I love Rachel. She has been my best friend since we were 14, and it breaks my heart to see what this trauma has done to her. Can you describe her mental state before the fire? She was struggling, exhausted, overwhelmed. Kate dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. She told me once that she wished the babies had never been born. I leapt to my feet. I never said that. She is lying. Mrs. Dawson, sit down, or you will be removed from this courtroom. The damage was done. Based on the evidence presented, the judge said, this court finds that Mrs. Dawson's mental state presents a potential risk to the minor children. Temporary custody is awarded to Mr. Dawson. Mrs. Dawson is granted supervised visitation, 2 hours, twice weekly, with a court-appointed monitor present. The words washed over me like ice water. My babies. The children I crawled through fire to save, gone. I want you to hear me clearly. Family court is not designed to find truth. It is designed to make decisions quickly based on incomplete information, in rooms where the loudest liar often wins. If you are facing a custody battle, get a lawyer who understands this. Get witnesses who will show up. Document everything in writing, and never assume the judge will see through the manipulation. I walked out of that courtroom with nothing. No husband, no home, no children. Just rage, and the absolute certainty that I would get them back, no matter what it took. 2 weeks after I lost custody, my sister Megan's brakes failed on a highway overpass. She survived, barely, with 6 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and a traumatic brain injury that would require months of rehabilitation. The accident report said mechanical failure. I knew better. I returned to Megan's house to find the front door unlocked. Nothing was missing, but on my pillow was a photograph of me sleeping, taken from inside the bedroom, and a note. I told you to stop. You did not listen. Next time, it will not be your sister in that hospital bed. It will be Noah and Lucas. Let it go, Rachel, or watch them burn. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 3 a.m. I looked at the woman staring back. My eyes were hollow, and my cheeks were sunken. The burn scar running along my jaw felt like a brand, a permanent reminder of everything I had lost. On the counter sat Megan's painkillers, enough to let me sleep forever, enough to finally stop the pain. My hand reached for the bottle. I want to be honest with you about this moment. I was done. I had nothing left. They had taken my children, nearly killed my sister, murdered my investigator, and convinced the entire world that I was insane. I reached for those pills because I truly believed my sons would be better off without a crazy mother dragging them through more chaos. But then I saw it, right on the counter, where I had left it that morning. It was a photograph of Noah and Lucas at their first birthday party, their faces smeared with cake, both of them laughing. My hand dropped. In that instant, I realized one thing. If I died, they won. My sons would be raised by the man who tried to murder them. They would never know the truth. And maybe, someday, when they got in his way, he would try to hurt them again. I could not protect them by dying. I could only protect them by surviving. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection again. Okay, Rachel, I told myself, you have been burned alive, called crazy by everyone you know, and you are currently standing in your sister's bathroom at 3 a.m. having a conversation with yourself. You have officially hit rock bottom. Gold star. Now what? I actually laughed. It was a small, broken sound, but it was real. Now we fight dirty. 6 months passed. It was 6 months of jumping through every single hoop the court demanded. There was a psychiatric evaluation, weekly therapy sessions, parenting classes, and anger management workshops. For 6 months, I had supervised visits with my own children, just 2 hours at a time, with a stranger watching every single interaction. They took notes on whether I hugged them for too long or said the wrong thing. It was 6 months of rebuilding myself from the ashes, while they all watched, just waiting for me to fall apart. But I did not fall apart. I found a witness. Her name was Denise Cooper. She was a nurse who worked the night shift at the hospital where I had recovered. We met at a diner just outside of town. It was a run-down place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the 1970s. Denise's hands were shaking as she held her coffee cup. I saw your husband, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He was in the parking garage 2 days after the fire. He was on the phone, and he was furious. What did he say? I asked. He said, the bitch was supposed to die. Now she is telling everyone I did it. You need to fix this, Kate. Make her look crazy before she destroys everything. My heart stopped. You heard him say that? Every single word, she confirmed. I wrote down the date and the time. I even took a picture of his car because something just felt wrong. Why did you not come forward before? I asked. Denise's eyes filled with tears. 3 days later, someone broke into my apartment. They did not take anything. They just left a note on my pillow. It said, "Keep your mouth shut." I have a 17-year-old daughter, Mrs. Dawson. I was terrified. What changed? I saw your babies on the news, she said. They were at some charity event with your husband and that blonde woman. And I thought, those could be my daughter. Those could be my grandchildren someday. Denise met my eyes. What kind of person would I be if I stayed quiet? My lawyer immediately filed a motion to introduce Denise as a witness. Combined with the evidence of the affair and the financial records, it could be enough to reopen the criminal investigation. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. For the first time in 6 months, I allowed myself to breathe. We are going to win this time, I told Megan. I can feel it. I should have known better. I should have protected Denise. But I was so desperate for justice that I forgot they were watching everything I did. 1 week before the hearing, Denise Cooper vanished. Her car was found at the Knoxville airport, and her passport was missing. A handwritten note, clearly written under duress, said she needed to start over somewhere. No one knew her. The police ruled it a voluntary disappearance, but Denise had a 17-year-old daughter. She would never have left voluntarily. They took her, just like they had taken Marcus, just like they would take anyone who tried to help me. The hearing went on without Denise. Jason's lawyer completely destroyed my credibility. Custody remained with Jason. My visitation was reduced to once a week. I sat in my lawyer's office afterward, staring at the empty chair where Denise was supposed to have been. "What do we do now?" I asked. My lawyer could not even meet my eyes. "I do not know, Rachel," he said. "I honestly do not know." That night, I sat in my car in a parking lot and screamed until my throat was raw. I beat the steering wheel until my hands were bruised. And then I got very, very quiet because I realized something important. Playing by the rules was not working. The rules were designed to protect people like Jason. If I wanted to win, I needed to stop being the victim they expected me to be and start being the threat they feared. 18 months had passed since the fire. It was 18 months of fighting, losing, getting back up, and fighting again. I had taken a job as a clerk on the night shift at a grocery store to explain my odd hours. In reality, I was building a case that would survive any lawyer's attack. I tracked down the restaurant staff who had lied about Jason's alibi and discovered they were each paid $5,000. I found one of them, a young single mother named Lisa Martinez, and convinced her to sign an affidavit in exchange for immunity. I was making progress. It was slow and painful, but it was progress. And then I got a phone call that changed everything. "Mrs. Dawson, my name is Derek Cole. I am your husband's business partner. We need to talk." We met at a diner outside of town. Derek was nervous, checking the door every few seconds. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "You have been blackmailing Jason for months, because he is planning to frame me for everything," he admitted. "I found emails last week, fake paper trails. He's going to throw me under the bus and walk away clean. So, this is about saving yourself," I said. "Yeah, but it is also—" Derek paused. "Look out, I did not know about the fire. I thought I was just taking money from a guy who could afford it. I did not know he was going to try to kill his wife and kids." Derek slid a laptop across the table. "Kate keeps a digital journal. It is backed up to the company cloud. She uses Jason's login and probably does not realize it syncs to our servers." I opened the laptop and started reading. There was entry after entry detailing the affair, the planning, and the fire. Then I found one dated March 14th. "It is done. Jay came back for his phone like the idiot he is, but the house is burning and she is trapped inside. I should feel guilty, but I do not. R had everything I ever wanted, and she did not even appreciate it. Tomorrow, we start our new life. Me and Jay and the baby, the way it was always supposed to be." My hand was shaking. "Baby?" Kate was pregnant. She had miscarried 2 months after the fire. I read further and found something that stopped my heart cold. It was an entry from 2 years before the fire. "Jay does not know the real reason I wanted ER gone. He thinks it is about him, about us. But the truth is, R's father destroyed my mother. He had an affair with her for 15 years, promised to leave his wife, and then dropped her when she got pregnant. My mother raised me alone, in poverty, while Richard Dawson lived his perfect family life. R grew up with everything. I grew up with nothing. And now, I am going to take everything she has, just like her father took everything from me." I stared at the screen. Kate's mother and my father's affair, the one my mother found out about right before he died. Kate was my half-sister. I had thought the betrayal was about Jason, about jealousy, about another woman wanting my husband, but it was so much deeper than that. It was about a wound that had started before Kate and I were even born. Generational trauma has teeth, and sometimes it bites people who had nothing to do with the original sin. If you are in a situation where you need evidence, here is what I learned. Cloud backups are your friend. Most people do not realize that their text messages, photos, and secret journals might be syncing to shared accounts. Check Google Photos, check iCloud, check company servers if your spouse works with your friend. Digital footprints are very hard to erase completely. Over the next 6 months, I built a team made up of broken people, just like me. I assembled a team of unlikely allies. There was Derek Cole, a blackmailer searching for his own redemption. Lisa Martinez, a waitress who was consumed by guilt over a lie. Barbara Henderson, a forensic accountant who had tragically lost her own daughter and now offered her services for free to help survivors. After searching for months, I finally located Denise Cooper's daughter, Emma. She was 19 years old, working in a coffee shop and using a different name. I asked her, "Is your mother alive?" Emma's carefully built composure shattered. She explained that her mother calls occasionally from her hiding place. I asked if she could relay a message for me. 3 weeks after that conversation, Denise Cooper entered my lawyer's office. She was noticeably thinner, her hair grayer, and she had a haunted look in her eyes, but she was finally ready to talk. "I cannot stop being afraid," she told me, "but I also cannot live with myself if I stay silent." I understood then that I needed to get a direct confession from Kate. The journal entries could be argued away as mere creative writing, and the financial paper trail could be explained with some clever accounting. I needed Kate to admit everything, out loud and on the record. That is when I decided to set a trap. I found Kate in a grocery store and made myself look completely broken and defeated. I told her, "I am not here to fight. I just want to understand how this happened. I thought you were my friend." Kate should have simply turned and left. She should have immediately called her lawyer. But Kate Sullivan had been holding on to a dark secret for 3 years, and secrets can become incredibly heavy. "You want to know the truth?" Kate's voice dripped with bitterness and a sense of victory. "We were never friends. You were just in my way. I do not understand," I said. "Your father completely destroyed my mother," she sneered. "He had an affair with her that lasted for years and promised he would leave your mother. But when my mom became pregnant, he discarded her like she was nothing. She had to raise me all by herself in a tiny one-bedroom apartment, while you got to grow up in a big, beautiful house with 2 loving parents." I acted as if I knew nothing. "Of course you did not know. You never noticed anything that was not part of your perfect world. Perfect Rachel with her perfect life and her perfect husband who should have been mine all along." "What? Jason was yours?" I asked. "We dated first, before you showed up junior year with your innocent eyes and that shy little smile. He belonged to me, and you stole him." "I did not know," I repeated. "You never knew a thing," she spat, taking a step closer. "You just drifted through life, and everything good simply fell into your lap. So, yes, I was the one who planned the fire. I was the one who convinced Jason. I made sure that every single door was locked and every window was sealed shut. And when you somehow managed to get out, when you ruined all my plans by surviving, I helped him tear your reputation to shreds instead. You would have murdered my babies," I said. "Collateral damage," Kate replied with a chilling smile. I reached into my purse and took out my phone, making sure she saw that it was recording. The color drained from Kate's face, but she recovered almost instantly. Her smile came back, but this time it was sharper. "Do you honestly think that recording is going to matter? Check your pocket, Rachel." I froze for a moment, then reached into my jacket pocket and found a small device, a jammer. "I have known you were coming after me for months. Did you truly believe I would just let you walk out of here with evidence?" Kate lunged for my phone, but two large men suddenly appeared from behind the store displays. They were private security guards that Derek had hired. "That jammer has been disabled for the last 10 minutes, one of them said. "We have everything." I turned and looked at Kate's face, which was now a mask of pure shock. "You know what is so funny?" I said to her. "You spent 3 whole years trying to convince everyone that I was crazy and paranoid. It turns out I was just being incredibly thorough." I started to walk away, but then I stopped and looked back. Oh, and Kate? I was not the one who slept with Jason first. He told me that I was his first real girlfriend. It seems he has been lying to both of us from the very beginning. So much for him supposedly being yours. Kate's enraged scream echoed behind me as I left the store. The arrests were perfectly timed and coordinated by the district attorney's office, ensuring that no one had a chance to run or try to influence witnesses. Jason Dawson was taken into custody at his office, right in front of all his coworkers. He was in the middle of a meeting with a client when 4 uniformed police officers walked straight into the room. "Jason Dawson, you are under arrest for attempted murder, arson, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent." The color drained from his face as his meticulously built life came crashing down around him. "There must be some kind of mistake," he stammered. "Call my lawyer." "Your lawyer has already been informed," an officer replied, "but I do not believe she is going to be of much assistance to you." They led him out through the main entrance, past 50 people who stood and watched in complete silence. One of the women, a secretary named Janet who was known for bringing in donuts every Friday, spat on the floor at his feet. Kate Sullivan was arrested at St. Michael's Church. She was in the middle of her wedding, walking down the aisle in a beautiful white dress with 200 guests looking on. She was about to marry a wealthy real estate developer named Bradley Hamilton, who knew nothing about her past. The church doors suddenly flew open, and 4 police officers marched down the aisle. "Kate Sullivan, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit arson, being an accessory to attempted murder, and obstruction of justice." Her scream echoed throughout the vast church. Her mascara streamed down her cheeks as they pulled her away, tearing her veil and leaving her dress to drag on the floor. "Bradley! Bradley, help me!" she cried. But Bradley Hamilton just stood there at the altar, his face a mask of shock, as he watched his bride-to-be get dragged away in handcuffs. With 200 witnesses and at least 20 phones recording, the video was all over the internet within a few hours. The trial went on for 3 weeks, and the amount of evidence against them was staggering. There were Kate's journal entries, which were authenticated by forensic experts who confirmed all the timestamps and server data. Denise Cooper's testimony was backed up by security camera footage from the hospital, which showed Jason in the parking garage at the exact time she had mentioned. Lisa Martinez confessed to providing a bribed alibi. And then there was my recording of Kate's full confession. Every single word perfectly clear and admissible in court. Derek? Cole's financial records had been thoroughly verified by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Then Kate turned on Jason. "He made me do it," she shrieked from the witness stand. "He promised we would be together forever. He told me I was the one he truly loved. He used me." "Miss Sullivan, please control yourself," the judge said. "I gave him everything. I helped him plan the entire thing. I stood and watched that house burn to the ground, and now he is just going to let me take all the blame while he gets away with it." Kate's voice rose to a piercing shriek. "No! He was there that night. He was the one who poured the accelerant. He sealed the windows. He even came back for his phone like a complete idiot. It was all his idea." Jason's face went completely white. His lawyer immediately requested a recess, but it was far too late for that. The verdict was announced on a Thursday afternoon. Jason Dawson was found guilty on all charges: 3 counts of attempted murder, arson, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder, as well as witness tampering. Kate Sullivan was also found guilty on all charges: conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit arson, accessory to attempted murder, obstruction of justice, and witness intimidation. The sentencing hearing took place 2 weeks later. The courtroom was filled to capacity, with a line of news cameras at the back of the room. Judge Margaret Thompson looked down at Jason and said, "Mr. Dawson, in my 30 years on the bench, I have seen some truly terrible things, but I have never encountered a case quite like this. You married a woman, took a vow to protect her, and then you attempted to burn her alive along with your own children, all so you could collect an insurance payout and run off with your mistress." Jason just stared down at the table, refusing to look up. "You disabled the smoke detectors in the very house where your newborn babies were sleeping. You sealed the windows that were meant to be their only way out. You poured an accelerant all around their nursery," the judge continued, her voice as cold as ice. "And when your wife, against all possible odds, managed to escape with those babies in her arms, you just stood in the driveway and watched, and then you simply drove away. For the attempted murder of Rachel Dawson, I sentence you to 25 years to life. For the attempted murder of Noah Dawson, 25 years to life. And for the attempted murder of Lucas Dawson, 25 years to life. These sentences are to be served consecutively. In addition, you will serve 15 years for arson, 10 years for insurance fraud, 10 years for conspiracy, and 5 years for witness tampering. Your total sentence is 115 years to life. You will never be eligible for parole." The judge then turned her attention to Kate. "Miss Sullivan, you were Mrs. Dawson's best friend for 15 years. You stood by her side at her wedding. You held her hand through her miscarriages. You were even named godmother to her children. And you repaid all of that trust by plotting to have her murdered." Kate's face was a mess of tears and smudged makeup. "For conspiracy to commit murder," the judge announced, 40 years. For conspiracy to commit arson, 15 years. For being an accessory to attempted murder, 20 years. For obstruction of justice and witness intimidation, 10 years. That is a total of 85 years. You will be eligible for parole after you have served 40 years. Kate began to sob uncontrollably. "Please, I was in love. He manipulated me." The judge's face remained firm. "You were a grown woman who made a decision. You chose to help murder your best friend and her children for a man who was never going to choose you in the end. That choice has consequences." The gavel struck, and as the bailiffs led Jason away, he turned to look at me one final time. I stood up, met his gaze, and I smiled. It was not a cruel smile, nor was it a triumphant one. It was simply the smile of a woman who was finally free. 5 years later, I was standing in the kitchen of my new house, busy packing lunches. The house was on a quiet street in Nashville. It had 3 bedrooms, a yard with a swing set, and a porch with rocking chairs. It was not huge or extravagant, but it was filled with sunlight, laughter, and life. Noah and Lucas were sitting at the table, engaged in a serious debate about superheroes. "Batman would definitely beat Spider-Man," Noah declared with absolute certainty. "No way. Spider-Man has webs and a spider sense. Batman just has a lot of money and a cave." "Boys," I said, using my teacher voice, "what did we agree on about arguing at breakfast?" "That it raises our blood pressure and ruins our appetite," they recited together. "And?" I prompted. "And Mama already has enough gray hair," they finished. I laughed and gave them both a kiss on the head. "Exactly. Now, finish up your cereal. The bus will be here in 10 minutes. They were 8 years old now, perfectly healthy, happy, and filled with a boundless energy and countless questions about everything. They knew the truth, or at least the parts of it that were appropriate for their age. They knew their father had done a very bad thing. They knew he was in prison and would never be coming home. They knew that their mother had saved their lives. They did not know all the terrible details, and they did not need to. One day, when they are much older, I will tell them the whole story. But for now, all they need to know is that they are safe, they are loved, and they are wanted. After the trial, I used a portion of the money I recovered from the settlement to start a nonprofit organization. I called it Rising from Ashes. In 5 years, we helped over 3,000 women escape domestic violence. We provided legal aid, emergency housing, and trauma counseling. I spoke at conferences, testified before lawmakers, and appeared on talk shows. It was not for fame. I hated the spotlight. Every interview felt like ripping open old wounds. But I did it anyway, because every interview might reach one woman who needed to hear that survival was possible. One woman who was being told she was crazy. One woman reaching for a bottle of pills at 3 in the morning. I refused to let anyone else feel as alone as I did. My face was still scarred. My arms still bore the marks from that window, with white lines crisscrossing my skin like a map of everything I had survived. I did not hide them anymore. They were proof. They were proof that fire does not always destroy. Sometimes it transforms. A letter arrived one morning. The return address was from a prison. Mrs. Dawson, Kate Sullivan died yesterday. It was a prison fight. I wanted you to know. You won. You have the boys, your life, your freedom. I have nothing but time and regret. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it, but I wanted you to hear me say it. I am sorry, Jason. I read the letter twice. Then I walked to the fireplace and dropped it into the flames. I watched it burn. I felt nothing. There was no satisfaction, no closure, and no relief. There was just an emptiness where the rage used to be. That night, after the boys were asleep, I stood at the window, watching the stars. I thought about everything I had lost. My innocence, my trust, my belief that the world was a fair place. I thought about everything I had gained. Strength, a purpose, and a community of survivors who looked to me for hope. I thought about the scars that would never fade, the nightmares that still woke me up, and the way I still flinched whenever I smelled smoke. I want to be honest with you about something. I did not get a fairy tale ending. I got a real ending. I won, but it cost me things that I can never get back. I do not sleep through the night. Parking garages give me panic attacks, and my hands still tremble when I try to light a candle. But I am still here. My sons are unharmed, and with every sunrise, I make the choice to face the day. This is what survival actually is. It is not pretty, and it is not without pain. It is just moving forward. So if you are awake at 3 in the morning, wondering how you will get through the next day, you will. I give you my word, you will. You are not losing your mind, and you are not by yourself. Your experience is real, even if nobody else acknowledges it. Noah showed up in the doorway, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Mama, I had a nightmare. I went over and lifted him into my arms. He was 8 years old but still fit against me so perfectly. What was it about, sweetie? There was a big fire, and I couldn't find you. I hugged him tightly, feeling his small heart thump against my chest. I am right here, my love. I will always be right here. I took him back to his bed and tucked him under the covers. His brother Lucas was sound asleep, thrown across the mattress like a little starfish. I paused in the doorway for a quiet moment, just watching them breathe. They were my miracle boys. They were my entire world. These are the boys I went through hell and back to rescue. I understand something now that I did not understand back then. Some fires are set to completely ruin you, but other fires are meant to remake you. I went into that blaze as a wife who was far too trusting, a mother who saw only the good in everyone, and a woman who believed life was supposed to be fair. I came out of it as someone completely different. I emerged as a person who understands that evil can hide behind a familiar smile, that the system will not always defend the innocent, and that sometimes you must be your own hero because nobody else is coming to save you. But I also emerged with this knowledge. You have more strength than you know. You can endure more than you can possibly fathom. And there are people out there who will stand by you even when it feels like the whole world is against you. Find those people. Hold on to them with everything you have, and never, ever surrender. The sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, signaling a fresh start, a new day. I stepped away from the window and headed toward my son's room, feeling complete and shattered and victorious all at the same time. Because some women are not consumed by the fire. They are reborn from it. And if you agree that monsters need to be dragged into the light, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button this very moment. If this story reminds you of someone, please share it with them. Leave a comment down below and let me know. Has anyone ever tried to twist your reality and make you question your own mind? I personally read every comment because your story is important too. Make sure you turn on notifications so you are the first to know when a new story like this drops. And whatever you do, do not look away for even a second of what is about to unfold, because the conclusion will absolutely leave you speechless. Now, let us go back to where it all began. A closing thought and content notice. Our team has put immense effort into the research, development, and careful editing of this content to bring you a powerful story with meaningful life lessons. Every single word was chosen with the purpose of inspiring, empowering, and reminding you that no matter how bleak things get, there is always a path forward. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and thank you for being a valued member of this community. We look forward to seeing you in our next story. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being a part of our community.